Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Wednesday's edition of Alaska Weather, 28th day of July now, 2021. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. I'll be hosting today's show. And up first, we've got high surf advisories on the hazardous weather graphic here, the yellow shaded areas along the coast of the Kuskokwim Delta and Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island, mainly southwest coast there, and the Bering Strait coast, also south shore of the Seward Peninsula and eastern Norton Sound, all under the influence of a high surf advisory due to continuous persistent southwest wind flow across the eastern Bering Sea from roughly the eastern Aleutians there, creating high surf and minor beach erosion possible, but not much in the way of any threat of coastal flooding occurring. And that's out through tonight and some cases into the early morning hours, maybe as late as 9 a.m. currently there for the Bering Strait coast, but ending by 6 a.m. for the Kuskokwim Delta coast. Anyway, moving on, we'll see satellite imagery. A lot of clouds pushing into the north or the central interior into the Fairbanks area with some moderate to heavy rainfall amounts, 24-hour amounts just northwest of Fairbanks at Chattanooga was about a little over an inch, 1.08 inches by mid-afternoon today when the 24-hour period ending. Heaviest rainfall amount over at Nome, 1 2/3 inches of precipitation there. And also some pretty good rainfall amounts up over the northwest coast. I believe, let's see, Kivalina had about 3/4 of an inch of rain, and also the Western Brooks Range area there into the western north slope. But the front, as you can see, really narrows out, thins out as it gets south of Norton Sound there, right along the southwest coast into the Pribilofs, extending down to the Atka Island area. Then some more moisture over the western Aleutians, but the precipitation just south of the area there, the precipitation producing clouds south of the western Aleutians, but not too far off to the south. And also south of the Panhandle, you can see some cloudiness there, but showers mostly in British Columbia or the Queen Charlotte Islands. So it's a dry day across the Panhandle with some sunshine, temperatures into the upper 60s, lower 70s. And wasn't until you get to Yakutat pick up some miserable rain. They had 1/100th of an inch in the last 12 hours, some shower activity there. And also over the Susitna Valley, up toward the eastern Alaska Range areas, and in the Copper River Basin as well. So kind of a widespread area of rainfall, and that's put fire danger about to non-existent. There were not any areas of high fire danger that I could find around the state today. Otherwise, even though that frontal boundary is pretty narrow and thin, some pretty gusty wind associated with it, enough gradient there for Bethel to see a peak wind gust 43 miles per hour today, and around, Cape Newinam, 50 mile per hour wind gusts, and Cold Bay and Kipnuk had winds gusting to 51 miles per hour. Even stronger winds occurred up over the Seward Peninsula. A place, Ella Creek, at the 2,300 foot level there in over the Seward Peninsula had a peak wind gust 72 miles per hour, again at 2,300 feet, so a little higher elevation there. Still pretty good on the winds, even at that elevation, not really all that high. Red Dog Dock had gusts to, and Tin City, both a little over 50 miles an hour. And again, in advance of that front, moderate to occasionally heavy rainfall occurring there, especially the southern slopes of the DeLong Mountains, western Brooks Range area, but a good slug of moisture extending right into the Kobuk-Koyukuk Valley, into the central Tanana Valley, with showers and rain into the Copper River Basin, lighter than it was north of the mountains. Otherwise, you can see a lot of clearing over the Panhandle for some good sunshine today. Also, the lee side of the Aleutian Range in the Alaska Peninsula, sunshine seen from Port Hayden, or actually Nelson Lagoon, all the way up in toward King Salmon. Some breaks southern Cook Inlet today. But Aleutians socked in with clouds. Central eastern Bering Sea, mostly cloudy. A little clearing just north of the western Aleutians. Really increases there as you get up over the western Bering Sea and behind the front. Forecast for tonight. Again, that front edges inland, so rainfall and wind will diminish there over the northwest interior slowly and won't be as heavy either on the wind or the rainfall there for the areas behind the front. It'll tend to increase a little bit and push up the Yukon River Valley a little bit, but not too much more extensive than it is. And the moisture will dissipate that fell over the Tanana Valley today and shift off into the Yukon, Northwest Territories. But fair chance of rain, heaviest again, southern slopes of the Brooks Range, even much of the North Slope. Look for areas of rain on out to the eastern Arctic coast. And narrow band of light rain extends along that weak frontal boundary there, all the way to that low just south of Amchitka Island. So look for some occasional light rain, fog, and drizzle. Definitely IFR conditions for the southern Bering and the central Aleutians. Chance of showers there for the Fox Islands, and probably maybe some light rain, continuous light rain on the south side of the western Alaska Peninsula. But the north side staying dry, and Kodiak, dry, variable cloudiness. Same thing for southern Alaska, south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, and in the Kuskokwim Valley, variably cloudy skies. Risk of some showers with that weak trough, Susitna Valley, northern Susitna Valley, back up toward Denali Park. And drying out though over the eastern interior, stays dry over the Panhandle. Risk of a shower down toward maybe Metlakatla, mostly over Dixon Entrance. That'll continue into tomorrow as well, and maybe even increase and push northwestward a little bit. So a little cooler and better chance of there being a few showers around for the southern Panhandle, but stays dry and partly mostly sunny to the north. A little warmer, risk of a shower Yakutat, and cloudy skies and chance of rain from the North Slope and the Brooks Range into toward the central interior. Be just pretty light amounts there, and a little heavier back toward the trough toward the west coast there, but that'll extend all the way down into the southern Bering Sea area. Otherwise, a dry day for south central Alaska. Risk of some showers along the entire stretch of the Alaska Range there, but should stay dry. Cook Inlet, Manusquesit Valley, Prince William Sound, Kodiak Island, hopefully. And then the outlook for Friday, not too bad, but as far as July goes, not that great either, especially on the temperatures. Looking at periods of rain continuing, that persistent frontal boundary hung up over the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island area to the western Arctic coast, but slowly weakening, but hanging together enough for cloudy skies and periods of rain, fog, extending all the way up to the eastern North Slope. Eastern areas, mostly cloudy and maybe approaching 70 degrees, possibly in the Copper River Basin, maybe lower 70s, but that's going to be tough to come by. Seeing a temperature of 70 or greater in the Tanana Valley to the Yukon Flats. Shower activity, mostly cloudy skies there, and stays dry over the southeast coast. Maybe not quite as many clouds the way I've shown there, so call it partly sunny, dry with light winds for the Panhandle. Again, temperature 60s, maybe into the lower 70s possibly, and a risk of a few showers up over the Turnagain Arm area, Manusca Valley. Otherwise dry. That's actually afternoon showers developing over the Talkeetnas into the Chugach Mountain areas, possibly to a lesser extent though for the Kenai Peninsula. Stays dry Kodiak Island with possibly some sunshine there on the eastern side of the island with a weak southwest wind flow. That same southerly wind flow coming up the western side of the high pressure area south of Kodiak will probably carry surges of moisture northward to the mostly affecting the southern side of the Alaska Peninsula, and some of those will slip on up to the southwest coast, Togiak Bay, Dillingham, maybe right on up toward Nunavak Island, possibly slipping into the Bethel area, chance of showers to the Pribilofs. Otherwise, the Aleutians not too bad, both wind and precipitation-wise. Dry for the central Aleutians, but considerable areas of low clouds and fog, resulting in areas of IFR across much of the Bering Sea. Otherwise, looking at the low temperatures forecast for Thursday morning, not too bad, 40s to lower 50s, North Slope in the Arctic coast, and mostly in the lower 50s central interior areas, and upper 40s to mid 50s south central Alaska, upper 40s Copper River Basin, 40s lower 50s for the Panhandle, and near 50 for Kodiak Island. And for the highs tomorrow afternoon, throwing a few more 70s in, maybe 75 for Eagle in the afternoon, 73 Tok, Northway, and Fairbanks might push up towards 70, maybe jump it a little bit there, 71 to maybe 73 in some areas, and pushing up towards 70 in the Copper River Basin. Otherwise 60 south central Alaska, 60s to lower 70s for the Panhandle, and in the lower 50s for the Bering Sea to upper 50s for the Aleutians, although near 60 on Alaska, upper 50s for Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, mid 60s Kodiak Island. Lows 40s and 50s around the state about sums it up for the low temperatures on Friday morning, and lower to mid 50s for the Panhandle. Again, upper 40s for the Copper River Basin, upper 40s, lower 50s southern Alaska. Highs 70, 75, eastern interior, mostly east of Fairbanks, will be near 70. A little warmer in the Panhandle there, mid-70s, 76 there for Klawock and Craig. Mid-70s, Juneau on up to Skagway, and for areas Northway Toke on up toward Eagle, mid-70s. But much cooler back to the west. You can see just getting over 60 degrees in the Kuskokwim Valley. On up toward Bettles, the highest 60, 50s lower to mid for the Arctic coast, and mid-50s for the Aleutians.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather. First graphic, we've got marginal VFR along the Arctic coast there, but VFR for the North Slope. IFR starting in the day along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. Western interior, marginal VFR becoming IFR out toward the coast, eastern Bering Sea. Southern Bering Sea, Pribilofs, all of the Aleutians IFR, the Alaska Peninsula. Breaking out to some VFR, northeast Bristol Bay, Fognac Island, and Cook Inlet, western Kenai Peninsula, and north of the Alaska Range, VFR, central upper Tanana Valley, the Yukon Flats, and marginal VFR mostly for the Copper River Basin, IFR, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, and the north coast of the Panhandle, but VFR down to the south. And then for the, the afternoon, Thursday, whoops, a little delay there. Okay, Thursday afternoon, still some lingering IFR, southern slopes of the Brooks Range, Koyukuk Valley, northern Koyukuk, Kobuk Valleys. Otherwise, central western interior, marginal VFR. Marginal for the central western Arctic coast, VFR for the eastern Arctic coast. North slope looking pretty good, VFR mostly. Copper River Basin, eastern interior, VFR. Looks like some VFR extending down to just east of McGrath and Nikolai and toward the mountains, but marginal VFR areas of there for the central and western Alaska Range. VFR northeast Bristol Bay, Cook Inlet, and Susitna Valley. Prince William Sound to the Talkeetnas in towards, say, Eureka. Marginal VFR, and then IFR maybe for Cape St. Elias, otherwise marginal VFR to Yakutat, and then VFR for the Panhandle. And the Aleutians, Bering Sea, IFR. And then for the morning, Friday, IFR long and south of the Brooks Range there into the Kobuk and northern Koyukuk valleys, but VFR eastern interior. IFR up the Yukon River there to about the lower Yukon River Valley areas, southern Seward Peninsula. Not bad, North Slope, VFR, some marginal VFR, Central Arctic Coast. Widespread IFR for the Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, Pribilofs, all of the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, marginal VFR in the North Shore of the peninsula there into Bristol Bay, and still some holdout VFR, Cook Inlet and Lake Iliamna, Kamishak Bay. Prince William Sound, marginal. Looks like IFR, though, right around the eastern North Gulf Coast in areas. Mostly VFR for the southeast coast, a little lower conditions down toward Dixon Entrance. For the afternoon, same pattern there, some IFR along the coast of Prince of Wales Island, otherwise VFR. And that VFR zone extends up across Copper River Basin into the eastern interior. IFR, a little less extensive now, southern slopes of the Brooks Range, northern Koyukuk Valley, otherwise pretty good marginal VFR into the Kuskokwim Valley across the Alaska Range, western Cook Inlet, part of the Talkeetnas. Solid IFR for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, with IFR again south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Stays nice for the North Slope with areas of marginal VFR for the Arctic coast. Passes looking not too bad. Anatuvik, lowest conditions, southern approach, could be IFR. Same thing for Adigan, lowest conditions, southern entrance, VFR north side. And for Lake Clark, IFR becoming marginal. Rainy, trending better throughout the day, lowest conditions in the morning, IFR becoming marginal VFR. Windy, marginal VFR becomes VFR. And Isabel, same trend, marginal early on and then VFR toward the afternoon. Mentasta, VFR the entire day. Tanita, though, IFR becomes marginal in the afternoon. And Portage, same pattern, same trend, IFR to marginal. Chilkoot and White, IFR to VFR. And for the freezing levels, quite a gradient there across the Bering Sea. And jet stream pretty much follows that with 12,000 feet just south of the Pribilofs, ridging warmer air aloft into the central interior, and icing with the moisture moving from southwest to northeast, mostly over the western interior. Light isolated moderate rime icing in that area, and a jet stream, 110 knots southwest flow across the western Brooks Range along mountains. Westerlies 100 knots central Bering Sea, 60 knot southwest winds into the northern northeast winds of the Panhandle, and at 9,000 feet about the same pattern there, and 3,000 feet we've got 30 to 40 knot winds there from the Alaska Peninsula right up into the western interior, 30 knots for the North Slope western Arctic coast, and that translates into quite a widespread area of considerable moderate chop, surface 6,000 feet, especially for small aircraft, western interior, Brooks Range area, St. Lawrence Island. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, joined once again by the science liaison of GINA, Eric Stevens. GINA, of course, is the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And GINA is all about satellites, and Eric is always here to tell some really cool stuff about satellites. Now, the last time you were here, we talked about how the weather satellites can see clouds and what's under the clouds, but you're telling me that satellites can do a lot more, even protect the general public with aviation safety information.
That's right. There's one particular aspect of satellites we're going to talk about today that might not be immediately obvious, and that is detecting things in the atmosphere that are not clouds, that are not snow, not rain, but rather a hazard that can happen here in Alaska, and that is volcanic ash.
Of course.
When a volcano goes off, puts ash in the air, this is of course a hazard to the public if the ash were to fall on the ground in accumulating amounts.
Sure.
Additionally, while the ash is in the air, and this is the more frequent hazard, is it's a hazard to aviation because you cannot fly an airplane into volcanic ash without great risk. Worst case scenario, the ash gets into a jet engine, wrecks the engine, kills the engine, and now you have an airplane flying with no engines. It won't fly for long. So aviators need to avoid that ash. How do you avoid the ash? You have to know where it is by identifying it with a satellite image and perhaps predicting then where the ash will flow with the overall weather patterns. Satellites are so important for identifying when a volcano goes off and then tracking the ash after the volcano injects the ash into the atmosphere.
Now, are you talking about seeing the heat signature or a huge volcanic plume with a cloud that we're used to seeing in the really pretty pictures of any Alaska volcano that's erupted recently, Redoubt, for example? Or are we talking about the really fine details? Because this is polar orbiting satellites, the ones that are very low to the ground, right?
The geostationary satellites can do some detection. The polar orbiters, like you say, they're closer to the Earth. They give the even better view. In answer to your question, I would say all of the above.
Oh, okay.
A heat signature from a volcano going off with all the heat that comes with the eruption, that can be identified in infrared imagery.
Okay.
We've got images from the Kamchatka Peninsula. That's the far eastern part of Russia on the western side of the Bering Sea, loaded with volcanoes.
Right.
You know, Alaska has plenty of volcanoes of its own. We can also be affected when a volcano goes off in Kamchatka, say, and then the weather carries that ash toward Alaska from the west.
Right.
You can see the infrared heat signature, like you say. Also, the ash in the air can be detected by doing some sophisticated channel differencing within the satellite data. You can find the identification of sulfur dioxide, say, that's a component of the volcanic emission, and you can trace this with the satellite imagery. Sometimes volcanoes go off that haven't gone off before, and we're not expecting them to go off. Say if there's no seismometers around a given volcano that hasn't gone off in 100 years, you might not be expecting it to go off. In the satellite imagery, since satellites can be globally comprehensive, that might be the first sign that you have that a volcano in an unexpected area is going off.
That's a good backup system. Okay.
Right.
Wow.
Right. And people are working all the time on automating the interrogation of satellite data by computers to provide a first alert to a human, so the software will say, we think this might be important. Human, go take a closer look. Because the people are still the best way to interrogate the imagery, but the planet's a big place, and we can't be looking everywhere all the time, so the software helps give a first cut. And then in Alaska, there's a special kind of surprise angle where the satellites are helpful, and that is the Katmai eruption of 1912. Huge eruption. There is still somewhat of a moonscape out there in southwest Alaska where all this ash is laying on the ground. And sometimes a strong weather pattern comes along where we have roaring northwest winds that go across the Alaska Peninsula there. and can actually pick some of this ash up
Right.
off the ground. No volcano is going off. This was more than 100 years ago that volcano actually blew. So you're not going to see a heat signature like we were discussing. There will be no seismic signature of a volcano going off. So those data sets, they'll say, oh, no problem. But you can see in some of the satellite imagery this ash, as it's called, resuspended. When the wind comes along, picks it up, the ash can be lofted a few thousand feet in the air just with the wind. And an airplane flying into that plume is exposed to some danger. So we need to track that ash to provide guidance to aviators that you don't want to be flying here at these elevations in this area. We've got some imagery of the resuspension, and you can see the wind blowing strongly from the northwest, picking up the ash and blowing it down to the southeast. And so that's another, perhaps not immediately obvious hazard of volcanic ash. Katmai is the gift that keeps on giving, for sure.
Very good. So we've got satellites that can help us understand the weather from the past and the immediate past. And we talked last time about how that's feeding into the forecast modeling to help improve predictions. But now they're also protecting the general public with aviation-sensitive information and watching volcanoes, whether they're erupting or maybe have erupted in the past, and finding the left-behinds from those volcanic events there. So really impressive stuff. Eric, thanks so much for joining us again today. And you're a gift that keeps on giving from the satellite community, so thanks a lot, and we hope to have you back again soon. Again, Eric Stevens with GINA at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And if you'd like to check out any of the information that Eric has shared with us again today, you can do that very easily by going to www.gina.alaska.edu. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the marine forecast here for Thursday. Light winds up along the eastern North Gulf Coast is 5 to 10 knots. And along the central coast of the Panhandle, northerlies at 15 knots, northeast 15 there along the coast of, or just off the coast of Prince of Wales Island. Inside waters, variable winds at 10 knots, the seas right around 2 feet. And moving on to the outlook for Friday, shaping up like this. Still light winds. Variable, 5 to 10 knots on the south coast, north to northwest, 10 to 15 knots, barely a breeze, 3 to 4 foot seas. And the inside waters, central and southern inside waters, north to northwest winds, breezes at 10 knots, and Lynn Canal, northerlies, 15 knots with 3 foot seas. Moving to Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast, all light and variable tomorrow at 10 knots, seas 2 to 3 feet. Barren Island, southwest at 15. Small craft advisories over Kamishak Bay, southerly winds at 25 knots with 6 foot seas. Cook Inlet, south to southwest winds, 20 knots with seas running 4 to 5 feet. And then for Friday, Cook Inlet, light winds from the south and southwest at 10 knots. Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, southeast breeze at 15 knots, 3 foot seas. And winds stay light and variable for the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound, 10 knots or less with seas running around 2 to 3 feet. Moving out west, Kodiak Island, small craft advisories for Shelikof Strait, wind southwest 25 knots, seas at about 6 feet. Small craft advisories also over the Alaska Peninsula, southerly winds 25 to 30 knots, 6 to 7 foot seas. Bristol Bay, small craft advisories, south winds 25 knots, seas at about 6 feet. Otherwise, from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, 20 knot winds. Next ends up the east side of Kodiak. Even lighter winds for that same area on Friday, 15 knots east side of Kodiak Island, all the way down to Castle Cape. Shelikof Strait, southwest at 20. Bristol Bay coming down under small craft advisory levels to 20 knots. And the Alaska Peninsula, 25 knot winds from the south and southeast with 5 to 6 foot seas. And the Aleutians, Fox Islands, south to southeast, 20 knots, 4 to 6 foot seas. And Adak and Atka, east southeast, 15 to 20 knots, turn northeast to 20 for Amchitka Island, and 15 knots from the northeast, Kiska to Shimia. Small craft advisories from Shimia to Kiska on Friday. Winds will be south, coming up to 25 knots, Amchitka Island east at 15. Variable to east, 10 to 15 knots, Adak and Atka. Southeast winds for Unmak Island at 15 knots. Unalaska Island, southeast 20 to 25 knots. And for the west coast, small craft advisory south of Nunivak Island, southerlies 25 knots with 8 foot seas. Pribilof, southwest 15 knots, same thing for the Yukon Delta coast. And St. Matthew Island, southwest of 20. St. Lawrence Island, south of 20. And for Norton Sound, small craft advisory, south winds 25 knots. Those come down to 20 knots for Norton Sound on Friday, southwest 20 St. Lawrence Island, 15 to 20 knots southerly winds for the southwest coast. Same thing for the Pribilofs and St. Matthew Island. Up along the Arctic coast, on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, we're looking at southwest winds on Thursday at 20 knots, 4 to 5 foot seas. Down to 15 from the south for the central coast, but small craft advisories, western Arctic coast, all the way down to the Bering Strait or to Wales from the south, with seas running 7 feet. And then for Friday, 25 knot southerly winds there from Wales to up to Point Hope there with 4 foot seas, and then 20 knot winds for the western Arctic coast. Central coast, light and variable, 10 knots, and the eastern Beaufort Sea coast looking at lighter winds, 15 knots from the southwest, seas only 1 to 2 feet. And for tonight, rain with frontal system up there from the north slope, much of the Brooks Range, western interior, but lightening up with the main front pushing inland, weakening. Rainfall amounts will be lighter for the Seward Peninsula and the northwest coast and the western Brooks Range, but a band of rain will extend all the way out to the central Aleutians to a weak low just south of Amchitka Island, and diminishing rain over the eastern interior, Tanana Valley areas, and just isolated showers elsewhere to clear skies for the Panhandle. Stays dry for Kodiak tomorrow, and risk of a shower southern southeast coast throughout the day tomorrow, otherwise dry with mostly sunny skies to the north, and rain periods of North Slope, Arctic coast, northern interior, and the west central interior, all the way down to Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, into the eastern Aleutians. Outlook for Friday, less of that action, but stays wet and cloudy and cool up over the north and northwest interior. A little sunnier and warmer for the southern part of the state.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.